my entrepreneurial journey started in my sophomore year of college, my undergrad year. I studied information systems right around the time that the dot-com boom had started in the US. I'm originally from Nigeria. And so going to college in the US, studying a degree in technology, and then having being around when all these different developments were started. This is around when Amazon started, when or at least got some prominence. There were a number of different companies as well. And I remember very vividly the fact that I was in this space and there was a lot of developments happening. But I came from a society in Nigeria where there were a lot of social challenges. And even though the technology was exciting and great, I always had a bias towards figuring out how that technology could solve problems for my society where I originally was from. And so I would say the bug came from wanting to solve problems in my society, but then leveraging the knowledge and the expertise I was gaining in the US at the time. Essentially, at the time, it was a funny story. At the time, I started my continued the venture at that time because me and some of my friends were we had some recollections of what it was like back home. There were certain types of drinks that were not available in the US from Nigeria. And so our solution at the time focused on trying to bridge a gap between supply of certain types of beverages from Nigeria to the US. And so my journey started essentially trying to build a B2B e-commerce portal online, even though at the time I didn't have a lot of knowledge about the beverage industry. I just had, the technology inclination, but a couple of other people on the team did have that knowledge. And so it gave me an insight into the need for collaboration, especially when you don't have the skill sets fully to attack a problem, that it made sense to collaborate and partner up with like-minded folks. And so the journey started building this solution, online solution, e-commerce B2B solution to solve problems in the beverage industry. This was probably about 2000, 2001, 99 to 2000, 2001 at the time. And so ultimately, three young guys who had an interest and a passion for beverage tried to do something. Obviously, it wasn't that successful, but I think the lessons I learned from that experience stayed with me. And I think I continued to have that vision of wanting to use entrepreneurship to solve problems. Subsequently, I actually moved back to Nigeria. And one of the biggest, I guess, dislocations in what I was expecting was that I went from a society where there was infrastructure, there was connectivity, there were a bunch of facilities that made it conducive or possible to pursue entrepreneurship, whereas I was moving into a city which, even though it was the capital, Abuja was the capital of Nigeria at the time, lacked a lot of basic infrastructure. And so things I took for granted, like connectivity to the internet, all of a sudden I went from having internet on my home, on my phone, being able to connect my phone to my laptop, to having to go to either hotels or to a cafe somewhere to get access to connectivity. And so I also understood from that experience that because I was working in an area, I was providing consulting support in an area that had to do with social services, so health, education, and all of that. I also realized that the lack of connectivity and infrastructure was also affecting other industries as well. And so that kind of brought back my interest into solving problems. And that's kind of when I started looking at education specifically, because I had been a product of the education system in Nigeria, public education all my life. But then I was now in a situation where the public education system was so horrendous that a lot of families, whether middle class or upper middle class or even the wealthy, were no more sending their kids to public school. In my time, the public schools were the best schools. But then by this time, this was now decades later, it had completely changed. And so my interest in solving those problems in education kind of reignited my commitment to using entrepreneurship to try to solve problems in education. Yeah, so I think the milestone I'm most proud of, I think, is the fact that I have gone from a feeling that I had to be the one solving certain problems, to realizing that I could be part of solving a problem, but it was actually more important for me in terms of a milestone in my career, to understand that um, raising up or supporting other people in an ecosystem-wide effort was more important than me trying to solve a problem. And I think that transition from, problem solver, go-getter, entrepreneur who's kind of, has blinders on a particular problem and a field, to understanding that there were so many other problems that needed to be solved, and being in a position to help support founders and entrepreneurs who also had ideas about solving problems that I was passionate about, or they were passionate about, or society needed, I think was the biggest milestone in my career. That realization that I didn't have to be the one to solve it, and I could support others to solve it, actually is my proudest milestone, I think, in terms of my development as an entrepreneur, because it also made me a better entrepreneur to understand how to support others, in addition to continuing to pursue whatever dreams that I have. So I think some of the challenges that I faced, I think I think there was some that was situational, in the sense that where I was in terms of my own capacity as a founder. So I think I would say domain expertise, if you want to put it that way. There was a lot of passion, but I think a lot of the passion wasn't necessarily commensurate with capacity or the ability to actually solve the problem. So I'll take, for instance, the first venture I did. Like I said, I didn't know anything about the industry, and even though I was working with folks who had some insights, it still wasn't enough. So I'd say domain expertise was one. Technically, we were sound. We knew what we wanted to build and what we needed to build. We had the skills to build it, but I think that domain expertise, that business, was a challenge.